The human brain is not designed for ease. It's designed for survival, and because of that, one of its default settings is resistance. Not because you're broken, lazy, or unmotivated, but because your nervous system was built to protect you from uncertainty, from failure, from expending energy when the outcome is unclear. Resistance is not weakness. It is not laziness. It is not lack of character. Resistance is biology, hardwired, ancient, and deeply protective. The moment you approach something that requires effort without an immediate reward, your nervous system activates a survival script that says, stop, conserve, withdraw. It's the same script that helped your ancestors stay alive by avoiding unnecessary danger, unnecessary movement, unnecessary exposure. But that same script, left unchallenged, becomes the reason people stall, freeze, scroll, delay. It's not that you don't want to act. It's that your system has learned to treat discomfort as danger. And until you understand that, you will keep interpreting hesitation as a personal failure instead of what it really is, a reflex written in the oldest language of the brain. That resistance shows up in the limbic system, in the amygdala, in the midbrain circuits that are tuned to detect risk and trigger caution. But those systems are not absolute. They are influenceable, moldable, and trainable. When you feel that wave of internal friction right before taking action, it's not a moral problem. It's a signal that your system is prioritizing safety over progress. But safety and growth don't live in the same place. If you want to move forward, you must be able to feel the weight of resistance without interpreting it as a stop sign. You must learn to witness the biological alarm without submitting to it. This is where the work begins, not in fighting the resistance, but in training the nervous system to recognize effort as safe, to teach the brain that action without certainty is not death, it's development. This happens through repeated exposure, through ritual, through breath, through awareness. It happens every time you feel the pull to retreat and instead take one step forward. That single step sends a message to the brain, this pressure will not break me. And the brain listens. The circuits adjust. The resistance weakens, not because it's gone, but because you've stopped obeying it. There is something sacred in learning to act before you feel ready. There is something divine in refusing to let emotion be the deciding factor of movement. You begin to operate not from comfort, but from command. You start building a brain that no longer waits for the conditions to be perfect. You stop worshiping the feeling of readiness and begin honoring the process of initiation. Resistance may still speak, but it no longer controls the outcome. Because your biology is no longer the master, it is the instrument, and you have learned how to play it. The ones who rise are not the ones who never feel resistance. They are the ones who have trained their nervous system to meet it, hold it, and still move forward. Not because it's easy, but because their wiring has been altered through fire, through choice, through sacred repetition. They are no longer reacting, they are responding. They are no longer questioning, they are commanding. And that shift is not theoretical, it is neural, it is chemical, it is real, it is the beginning of everything. The prefrontal cortex holds the power to override the emotional chaos of the limbic system, but only when it's trained under pressure. It is the part of the brain that distinguishes humans from every other species, the region responsible for focus, planning, impulse control, and vision-driven action. But it doesn't automatically lead, it must be summoned. In moments of resistance, discomfort, or fear, the limbic system, especially the amygdala, fires fast. It reacts to potential threats, to uncertainty, to anything that demands energy without guaranteed safety. And unless another part of the brain takes the lead, your behavior defaults to avoidance, delay, and retreat. This is where the prefrontal cortex must speak louder. Its language is not fear, its direction. It doesn't react, it responds. It holds the memory of what you said you would do, the clarity of what matters, and the structure of discipline. And it can quiet the emotional storm, but only if you've trained it to hold ground. That training does not come from reading. It comes from resistance, from showing up when it's uncomfortable, from taking action when your body wants to hide. Every time you feel the tension and choose to follow through anyway, you are activating and reinforcing the circuits of the prefrontal cortex. You are teaching your brain to prioritize intention over impulse. This becomes the foundation of self-command. Not the absence of emotion, but the ability to act in alignment with purpose despite it. The ability to hold the internal fire without being consumed by it. When you strengthen the prefrontal cortex, you are not becoming robotic, you are becoming sovereign. Your decisions are no longer hijacked by fear. Your focus is no longer scattered by urges. You operate with precision in the middle of chaos. And your biology starts to shift. The emotional waves still rise, but they no longer throw you off course. You remain steady, you move with vision, not just reaction. The beauty of this process is that it is accessible to anyone. You don't need to be fearless, you need to be trained, you need to meet your resistance with structure. You need to move when the mind says pause. That deliberate movement in the face of hesitation strengthens the very circuits that give you authority over your state. That is neuroplasticity in action. That is the slow forging of a brain that is built for challenge. Not just intellectually, but biologically, you were not designed to be ruled by fear. You were designed to lead through it. But that leadership comes at a cost. It comes through repetition, through presence, through the decision, again and again, to act from the front of the brain, not the back. To hold the line when emotion wants to collapse it. To trust that there is something stronger than your feelings, and that something is already built into you. All it needs is activation, and activation only comes through action. The path is narrow, but it is known. And once walked enough times, it becomes yours. Breathwork is the fastest, most direct way to shift your state from stuck to action. Ready. It is not abstract, it is not optional. It is the remote control of your nervous system, wired into your biology by design, waiting to be used not just in moments of crisis, but in every moment where forward movement feels distant. When resistance rises, when focus fractures, when energy dips, your breath is already changing, whether you're aware of it or not. Shallow, rapid breathing is the signal of panic. It tightens the system, narrows the mind, and locks the body into a freeze state. But the moment you take control of that breath, you take control of that state. You send a different signal up to the brain: I am not in danger. I am ready. There is a breath pattern called the physiological sigh, 2 short inhales through the nose, followed by a long exhale through the mouth. This breath is not theory, it is science. It is what your body naturally does after crying, or when you're about to fall asleep, or when deep relief washes over you. It is the body's own mechanism to offload carbon dioxide and restore calm. And when done deliberately, it shifts your entire system. Heart rate slows, the emotional centers of the brain downregulate, the prefrontal cortex re-engages. This is not passive relaxation. This is a strategic reset. In moments of internal resistance, when procrastination, hesitation, or anxiety blocks action, breath becomes your first tool, your first access point to regain momentum. Before the brain can be persuaded, the body must be stabilized. Before the circuits of focus and drive can light up, the chaos must be quieted. And breath does that, not with effort, but with precision, not with stories, but with signals. This is the biology of readiness, and it begins in the lungs. But this is not just about calming down. It's about creating clarity. It's about building a baseline of control that allows you to enter effort without being hijacked by emotion. Because once the breath is under control, the body follows, the brain follows, the mind becomes sharp again. The heart stops racing, the hands steady. This is when action becomes possible again, not because the task changed, but because your state did. You reset the system, you reclaim the driver's seat, and when breathwork becomes a habit, not just a rescue tool, but a ritual, you begin to hardwire a new response to stress. Instead of spiraling, you center. Instead of freezing, you lean forward. The resistance still comes, but it meets a system trained to meet it. And that system is not made of willpower. It is made of chemistry, repetition, obedience to what works. You are not at the mercy of your state. You are equipped to command it. Breath is not soft, it is sacred. It is strength in disguise. And when mastered, it becomes the first move in every breakthrough you will ever make. Visual anchoring is one of the most underused yet powerful tools for breaking through resistance, because your eyes are not just windows to the world, they are levers that shift your brain and body into action. The direction of your gaze changes your internal state. When your eyes go wide and wander, your mind does the same. When your eyes lock in and narrow, your focus follows. Vision controls attention, and attention controls behavior. That means the moment you take conscious control of your gaze, you begin to override the scattered, reactive circuitry that feeds procrastination, distraction, and emotional drift. Your visual system is directly connected to brain regions that govern arousal, stress, and action. This is not metaphor, it is anatomy. The neural pathways between the retina and the brainstem influence your internal state far more than most people realize. When you're feeling overwhelmed, unsure, or stuck, your gaze often unconsciously goes soft, unfocused, scanning the environment in an attempt to avoid the task. This wandering gaze reinforces a sense of disconnection, signaling to the brain that you are not engaged, not ready, not anchored. And the system obeys that signal. Your state follows your eyes. But when you flip the system, when you deliberately fix your gaze on a single point, especially one that is in the direction you intend to move, you reclaim control. You activate neural circuits that sharpen awareness, boost acetylcholine, and cue the body to prepare for effort. This is how warriors steady themselves before battle. This is how performers block out the crowd. This is how you silence the noise inside your mind, not with thought, but with sight. Anchoring your vision is anchoring your mission. It is a declaration to the brain, this is where we're going. You can train this, you can use this in every moment of hesitation, when your motivation dips, when you feel pulled in 10 directions, when you don't know where to begin, start with your eyes. Pick a target, hold your gaze, let everything else fall away. You are not just seeing, you are aiming. That aim activates the deeper structures of pursuit in your brain, the systems that evolve to chase, to endure, to finish. This is not a trick. It is a biological switch, and when flipped, it awakens something ancient, something embedded in the circuitry of movement and survival. Something that does not wait to feel inspired but moves when the eyes declare intention. When visual anchoring becomes a practice, you stop drifting. You stop being pulled by the inertia of delay. Your gaze becomes a weapon, a discipline, a tool that turns your nervous system from scattered to streamlined, from overwhelmed to aligned. This is how you break the loop, not with more noise but with stillness of vision, not by hoping for clarity but by creating it, first in the eyes, then in the brain, then in the behavior. Because clarity is not something you wait for, it's something you stare into until it shapes the world around you. Dopamine is not released at the finish line, it's released when you begin. It's the neurochemical that drives pursuit, not pleasure. And the moment you understand that, you stop waiting for success to feel good and start using forward action to generate fuel. When you sit still, caught in hesitation or overthinking, dopamine levels remain low. But the instant you lean forward, make the call, write the line, take the step, your brain begins to shift. The act of starting, even imperfectly, sends a message to the system, we are in motion, and motion is the biological trigger for momentum. This is why the people who consistently push through hard things aren't the ones with the best ideas or the easiest paths. They are the ones whose nervous systems have learned that effort is rewarding. Their dopamine isn't tied to the trophy, it's tied to the climb, and that link is not philosophical. It's physical, it's chemical. It lives in the brain's mesolimbic pathway, where signals from the prefrontal cortex and motor circuits converge to tell the system, this is worth doing. This is how you build a brain that keeps going, even when the goal is far away, by anchoring the reward not to the outcome, but to the effort itself. When you begin to move, even in the smallest way, the system responds, dopamine rises, norpine, freeing sharpens focus. The fog of indecision clears not because you forced it, but because you shifted your state, and that shift isn't accidental. It is earned through action. This is why waiting for motivation is a trap. It reverses the order. Motivation doesn't come before movement, it comes because of it. Because the nervous system is not inspired by thoughts, it's inspired by signals, and action is the loudest signal you can send. When you rewire your brain to crave movement instead of outcome, you become nearly unstoppable. You stop asking, "What do I feel like doing?" and start asking, "What can I do to feel alive?" And the answer is always the same: move forward, even one step, even one breath, because every action you take reinforces the identity of someone who moves toward challenge, not away from it. And your brain, over time, begins to believe you. The circuits adapt, the chemistry flows earlier, faster, stronger. Suddenly, the very things that used to feel heavy begin to call you, not because they became easier, but because your system became trained. The moment you stop tying dopamine to the external, you become free. You become your own generator. You create the energy you need by doing the very thing that felt impossible seconds before. That is neurochemistry in service of purpose. That is what it means to train not just the mind, but the reward system itself. You no longer need to be carried by success. You are carried by the sacred biology of forward movement. The miracle is not in the finish. It's in the fact that every time you move, the brain blesses the journey. Grit is not gifted, it's trained through exposure. The nervous system learns not by what you know, but by what you do under pressure, again and again. And every time you show up to something difficult and stay, you are instructing your biology in a language far more ancient than words: endurance. You're telling the brain, this challenge is survivable, and it listens. It doesn't just listen, it rewires. Neurons begin to fire differently. Circuits associated with escape begin to weaken. Circuits associated with persistence begin to strengthen. And over time, you develop what appears to be an unshakable will, not because you were born with it, but because you chose it repeatedly when it was hardest. You cannot think your way into grit. You cannot read your way into resilience. You must expose the nervous system to discomfort with structure, with intention, with repetition. You must step into hard things not just once, but over and over, until your biology adapts to carry it. Until the thing that once triggered stress becomes the place where your nervous system settles. This is what elite performers understand, whether in sport, art, war, or science. They know that the system changes not through ease, but through calibrated resistance, controlled struggle, measured chaos, enough to provoke adaptation, not collapse, enough to teach the body and brain to operate with precision inside pressure. The process looks simple. Do the hard thing and recover. Do it again, then recover. What's happening under the surface is anything but simple. Stress hormones spike, neural networks shift, synaptic pruning clears out the unhelpful, and plasticity builds what's useful. Your mind becomes sharper, but not just cognitively. It becomes sharp emotionally, spiritually, energetically. You stop fearing strain and start respecting it. You start seeing tension not as threat, but as teacher. And with that, your system opens. It begins to crave the challenge, not because it's easy, but because it is now familiar. This is the science of exposure, not reckless burnout, not unnecessary suffering, but repeated engagement with the edges of your capability. You don't grow by staying safe. You grow by meeting discomfort with breath, with focus, with presence, until your baseline rises. The noise of fear becomes background static. The urge to quit becomes a signal you no longer obey. That is not willpower. That is nervous system transformation. That is what happens when the stress response is no longer a wall, but a door. Grit is not how you feel. Grit is what you've trained your system to do. To stand when the instinct is to flee. To breathe when the heart is racing. To act with clarity when your body wants to shut down. And that training doesn't just make you better at hard things. It changes who you are. Not in theory, but in circuitry. Not in concept, but in your core. Because the only way to teach your system that you are unbreakable is to face what once broke you and show it, through action, that you are no longer the same.